Hi, and welcome to Drupal Brief. This is an AI-generated summary of another video, podcast, or blog post. If you want to learn more about what's being discussed here, then please go check out the source. This podcast is produced by the team at Drupal Forge. Drupal Forge is the new #1 open-source development and hosting platform. It has all the functionality of the expensive platforms, but at very affordable prices. If you're looking for a new hosting provider, contact us for a demo before you get locked in. Okay, that's it. Make sure to click subscribe, and here we go.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at something pretty big that's changing how state and local governments work online.
That's right. It's this new Department of Justice ruling on website and mobile app accessibility.
Exactly. And we're using the transcript from Talking Drupal, #498 DOJ accessibility ruling as our guide. The goal here is, well, to figure out what this really means for those government folks, but also, importantly, what it means for you when you're using their websites or apps.
And joining us is someone who really knows this space: digital agencies, government, education, nonprofits. You were CTO at the Drupal Association, right?
And now founder and principal consultant at M6L. Lots of relevant experience. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a lot of time thinking about this stuff.
Great. So you're going to help us cut through the complexity. I'll try and keep us away from too much jargon.
Sounds good.
Okay, let's dive in. The DOJ ruling, what's the core of it? What are they actually requiring?
So the main thing is state and local governments, plus these things called special jurisdictions, they now have to make sure their websites and their mobile apps meet WCAG 2.1 level AA.
WCAG 2.1 level AA. Okay, can you break that down a bit? What does that actually mean in practice?
Sure. WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It's basically the global standard for making web stuff usable for people with disabilities.
Okay.
And yeah, there's a newer version, 2.2, but the ruling specifically calls out 2.1 level AA. That's the target.
AA, not AAA.
Right. AA is considered a really strong, achievable level. AAA is the highest, but honestly, it can be super tricky. Like getting enough contrast for blue links on a light background and having them contrast with black text. That's tough. AA is the practical standard here.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So does this mean every single government website out there?
Good question. No, this is specifically for state and local governments.
Not federal?
Nope. Federal sites have had rules for a long time, since '98, actually. That's Section 508 of the ADA. You can look it up on section508.gov.
Right, I remember Section 508.
Yeah, and they updated to WCAG 2.0 back in 2017. So this new DOJ rule is kind of bringing state and local governments up to speed using the more current WCAG 2.1 WA.
Okay, so state and local, who exactly falls under that umbrella? Can you give some examples?
Sure. It's pretty broad. We're talking all 50 states, obviously. Then counties, cities, towns.
Like my city website.
Exactly. Plus public school districts, police departments, public hospitals, libraries, even public transit agencies. Basically, if it's a public service from a state or local entity, it's covered.
Okay. What about those kind of quasi-governmental things, like maybe a transit authority that's technically a private company but gets all its money from the government to run the buses?
Yeah, that's a great point. The ruling talks about special district government.
Oh.
These are like public entities set up under state or local law for a specific job, like running transit or water, and they manage their own money. So that transit example, if it's publicly funded to provide a public service, like Tramet here in Portland, which is its own thing but provides public transit, yeah, it's almost certainly covered by this rule.
Okay, so it's about the function and the funding, not just the official label.
Pretty much, yeah.
And this WCAG 2.1 standard, could it get updated later? Like, could they switch it to 2.2?
Oh, definitely possible. The DOJ can amend these rules. It might happen if advocacy groups push for it, or experts inside the DOJ recommend it, or maybe even if a court case sets a new precedent.
But for now?
For now, 2.1 is pretty comprehensive. And honestly, some parts of 2.2 aren't even fully baked into browsers yet. So 2.1 AA is likely going to be the standard for a while, maybe 5 years, maybe 10. It's pretty solid.
Okay, that gives some stability. So the ruling itself came out April 2024. It's in effect now.
Yes, the rule is technically active. The requirements apply now. But there are deadlines for compliance.
Okay, so they have some time to actually get things fixed.
Exactly. And the deadlines depend on the size of the government entity.
How does that work?
Well, for the bigger ones, jurisdictions with more than 50,000 people, they need to be compliant by April 24, 2026.
2026. So that's about, what, a year away from when we're recording this?
Roughly, yeah. And that covers most places, realistically.
Not the smaller ones.
Smaller jurisdictions, 50,000 people or fewer, and those special district governments we mentioned, they get an extra year. Their deadline is April 26, 2027.
So 2 years for them. Why the difference? Just resources?
Yeah, that's the thinking. Smaller places generally have fewer staff, smaller budgets.
Makes sense.
And maybe their websites impact fewer people directly, though that's debatable. But yeah, it gives them a bit more breathing room to figure things out.
Okay, pragmatic. Now, the big question. What if they don't meet the deadline? What are the consequences? Does the ruling say, like, you get fined X dollars?
Interestingly, no. The ruling itself doesn't lay out specific penalties or fines.
Huh. So, then what's the incentive?
Well, past experience gives us clues. The biggest risk is probably private lawsuits.
Ah, okay, like individuals suing.
Exactly. If someone with a disability can't use a necessary online service because it's not accessible, and there's now a clear government requirement saying it should be, that opens the door for a lawsuit.
We've seen that with private companies, right?
Yeah.
Target, Domino's.
Absolutely. Those were big cases. And it can happen in the public sector, too. Remember the Portland crosswalk ramp lawsuit? The city got sued because curb ramps weren't accessible and they had to make major expensive changes.
Right, so lawsuits are a big stick. Anything else?
The other potential leverage is federal funding.
They could lose money.
Potentially, yeah. The federal government could withhold funds from states or localities that aren't meeting federal requirements, including accessibility. And for places already running on tight budgets, that could be a huge blow.
Wow, okay, so even without specific fines in this ruling, the pressure is definitely there through lawsuits and funding.
Definitely. It's serious business.
Okay, moving beyond just compliance. Are there other benefits? Like, does making a site accessible make it better for everyone?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the key arguments for accessibility. When you design for clarity, logical flow, easy navigation things, it's essential for assistive tech users, you almost always create a better, easier experience for all users.
So fewer confused people calling customer support.
Exactly. People can find what they need faster, use services more easily. It makes things more efficient, saves staff time, saves money in the long run.
It's like that old, maybe slightly clunky deed website example.
Yeah.
Sometimes simpler is better.
Sometimes, yeah. Older sites using basic HTML might actually be more accessible than some flashy new site with poorly built widgets. But it's not always that simple.
Right.
Think about complex things like geographic information systems, GIS maps, making those truly accessible for screen readers, avoiding keyboard traps. That's a huge challenge, even if the underlying system is unified. Portland had an accessible hand-washing station map using ArcGIS, but it took real effort.
So accessibility isn't just about simple websites. It gets complicated fast.
Very fast, especially with specialized tools.
Which brings us to third-party services. This seems like a huge potential minefield. What about software governments buy off-the-shelf COTS software?
Yeah, this is critical. If a government uses a third-party platform to deliver a public service, that platform almost certainly needs to comply with the ruling.
Even if it's not on a .gov website address.
Right. Think about something like GovQA for public records requests. The URL might be something else, but it's providing a core government function.
And are those platforms typically accessible?
Often not as much as they should be. A quick check with a tool like Way on some of those GovQA portals often flags a lot of potential issues, alerts, errors, suggesting they might not meet WCAG 2.1 AA right now.
Any other examples?
Granicus is another big one used for meeting agendas and stuff. Their search forms have historically used layout tables, which is a big accessibility no-no for screen readers.
Okay.
And it's interesting, GQA, the company behind GovQA, got bought by Granicus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so now you have this bigger company, GRC, with tons of government clients who all suddenly need their platforms to be compliant. That's got to be putting pressure on them.
You'd think so. This brings up VPANs, voluntary product accessibility templates. What are those? Do they help?
So a VPAD is basically a vendor's self-report saying, here's how accessible our product is. They fill out a template detailing conformance to standards.
Sounds useful.
It can be, especially when you're buying software, to see if the vendor is even thinking about accessibility. But there are big limitations.
Like what?
Well, first, they're voluntary. Not everyone does them. Second, the quality and accuracy varies wildly. It's a self-assessment.
So they might grade themselves generously.
Let's just say it's possible.
Yeah.
And a VPAT might highlight what is accessible, but gloss over the parts that aren't meeting WCAG 2.1 AA. You also see things like accessibility statements or ACRs, accessibility conformance reports. Same idea. Just saying you're accessible doesn't make it true.
So if a government gets sued, can they just point to the VPAT and say, see, we tried?
Probably not a get-out-of-jail-free card. Showing intent is one thing, but actual compliance is another. What's likely more helpful is showing consistent effort, dedicated resources, documented improvements over time. A static VPAT from 2 years ago doesn't mean much if the product still isn't usable.
Okay.
And just to reiterate here, super important, we are not lawyers. This is not legal advice. If you have legal questions, talk to an actual lawyer.
Absolutely. Critical disclaimer. Okay, let's talk Drupal. Many government sites use Drupal. How does it stack up in terms of helping with this compliance?
Drupal actually has a really strong foundation and community commitment to accessibility. It's baked into the core development process.
Oh, so?
There are these accessibility gates. Basically, new features proposed for Drupal core have to pass manual accessibility testing by experts before they're accepted. That's a big deal.
That does sound significant.
Yeah, and there's ongoing work to get automated testing built in too. Plus, the documentation on Drupal.org has great guides on how to do accessibility audits, often using tools based on Xcore, like Site Improve.
Are there good examples of Drupal sites hitting that WCAG 2.1 AA mark?
Definitely. Washington County, Oregon is a good case study. They used modern Drupal, Site Improve for checking, and reported getting to 100% WCAG 2.1 AA compliance.
Wow, 100%.
Yeah, but it took sustained effort. They said something like 2-3 hours per week for a year just on fixing site-wide issues found by Site Improve. And that's not even counting problems introduced by content editors.
Right, the editors, they can mess things up accessibility-wise.
Oh, easily. Using headings out of order, not putting alt text on images, it happens all the time.
So how does Drupal help with that?
There are tools, contributed modules, like editorially. It can be integrated into the content editor to give real-time feedback, like, hey, you skipped a heading level, or this image needs a description. It provides kind of preventative guidance.
That sounds really useful.
Yeah.
Any weird technical quirks with Drupal and accessibility?
One kind of nerdy one is about decorative images. HTML itself doesn't have a simple standard way to mark an image as purely decorative, something a screen reader should just ignore. Okay.
So Drupal has modules like decorative image widget that let editors mark images that way, which is good. But automated scanners might still flag them as missing alt text because there's no universal HTML attribute. It can cause false positives in reports.
Ah, annoying. What about Drupal CMS, the distribution? Does its accessibility tools recipe solve everything?
It helps. It bundles editorially and other helpful tweaks, but it's not a magic bullet. The overall accessibility still heavily depends on the front-end theme you build, the design, the components. That has to be accessible.
So the recipe helps editors, but the developers still need to build the site right.
Exactly. And honestly, the accessibility of Drupal's own backend, like the admin interface and Seek editor, needs more testing to be fully 2.1 AA compliant itself. But the DOJ ruling is focused on the public-facing stuff.
Right. That's the key distinction, what the public uses. Okay, let's tackle PDFs. Always a tricky one. Are they covered?
Yes, PDFs are definitely covered by the ruling.
Ugh. Okay. Are there any exceptions? Yes, a big one. Archived content. If a PDF was created before the compliance deadline and is clearly marked and stored as archived material, not current info, it's exempt.
Okay, archived is key there, not just old.
Right. It probably needs to be in a specific archive section. But any PDF created or edited after the deadline, it has to be accessible.
And making PDFs accessible. That's hard, right? Especially existing ones.
It can be incredibly difficult and time-consuming. Tools like Moncito or Aqua Optimize can check PDFs for structural issues, but fixing them often means going back to the original source document, like the Word file, making that accessible, and then re-exporting the PDF.
That sounds like a massive job for some places with thousands of old PDFs.
It really is. We talked about this way back in Talking Drupal, episode 316 with Rain Michaels. The advice often boils down to, avoid PDFs if you can. Use HTML instead.
But people like PDFs for printing or emailing.
True. Though Drupal has pretty good print-to-PDF capabilities from HTML now, and PDFs can be accessible if generated correctly. For example, if you have an accessible website that builds a PDF on the fly from that content, like Portland's Agenda Builder.
Then the PDF should be accessible too.
Theoretically, yes. The problem comes when the source is an inaccessible Word doc template or something. So the best advice is still use HTML first. Only use PDFs for maybe archiving accessible source material. And remember, even archived PDFs made after the deadline need to be accessible.
Got it. HTML first. Okay, for an organization, maybe a smaller town, just hearing about this, where do they even start? It sounds overwhelming.
Yeah, it can be. I'd say prioritize. Focus first on your main public-facing services and forms, the report a pothole form, paying taxes online, that kind of thing.
Makes sense. What else?
Do a quick basic audit of your look and feel. Is your color contrast okay? That's fundamental. Start talking to your third-party vendors now about their compliance plans and timelines.
Get them on the hook early.
Exactly. And if you have lots of legislative documents online, like city codes or charters, start thinking about how to make those more accessible. Sometimes the numbering and structure gets really complex.
So tackle the most critical stuff first.
Yeah.
Is 100% compliance realistic by the deadline for everyone?
Honestly, probably not for many, especially smaller organizations. It's a big lift.
And enforcement.
Yeah.
You mentioned lawsuits and funding. How strictly do we think the current administration will push this?
That's hard to say, and we should probably avoid getting too political. Enforcement priorities can shift. Maybe they focus heavily on equity and push this hard. Maybe other things take priority. Maybe it even gets politicized somehow, targeting specific places. It's uncertain.
So the main drivers will likely stay private lawsuits and funding threats.
That seems most likely, yeah. And as more governments grapple with this, the challenges and best practices will become clearer, which will probably shape how enforcement works too.
You mentioned platforms like Drupal earlier. Is migrating to something like that a key step?
It could be. I think step one is audit your current site. See how big the gap is. If fixing your existing platform looks like a massive, expensive project, then yeah, evaluating a move to something with a stronger accessibility foundation like Drupal makes a lot of sense.
Especially with those government-focused distributions.
Right. Things like Govinator in the US, LocalGov in the UK, GovCMS in Australia, they offer good starting points and models. But again, the platform alone isn't enough. You need accessible themes and development practices.
Okay, one last thing. Those accessibility widgets or overlays you see sometimes, the little icon you click for contrast or font size options, are those a valid solution?
The widgets. Mostly, no. I tend to think of them as accessibility theater.
Theater.
Yeah, like it looks like you're doing something, but it doesn't fix the real problems. It's the website equivalent of taking your shoes off at the airport, makes you feel like something happened, but doesn't address fundamental security.
Oh, okay. So what's wrong with them?
They might offer cosmetic changes, dark mode, bigger text, but they usually can't fix underlying structural issues. Keyboard traps, missing headings, bad color contrast in the actual design. The widget can't fix that.
And people who need those adjustments often have their own tools anyway.
Exactly. Users who rely on screen readers or magnification or specific contrast settings usually have browser-level tools or operating system settings already configured. The widgets are often redundant and can sometimes even interfere with those tools. They give a false sense of security.
So no quick fixes. Build it right from the start.
That's the only real way. Accessibility has to be foundational, not a coat of paint you slap on afterwards.
This has been incredibly insightful. So the big picture. This DOJ ruling is a major move towards making public digital services accessible to everyone. There are deadlines, real consequences.
And real challenges, for sure, but also a huge opportunity to just make things work better for all citizens.
Definitely. And for you listening, think about your own local government's website or apps. How accessible are they for you? Have you ever run into problems?
Yeah, this ruling aims to fix those problems, but it'll take awareness, effort from the governments, and maybe even some nudging from citizens like you to make sure it happens. Go take a look at your local sites with accessibility in mind.
A huge thank you to our expert for breaking all of this down for us. Really appreciate your insights.
Happy to be here.
If you want to connect further, you can find Joshua Wamy on Drupal.org, Drupal Slack, LinkedIn. Check out the blog, joshua.wamy.com, for a companion post. And the consultancy is M6L.
That's right.
And big thanks to the Talking Drupal folks for the original transcript we worked from. You can find them on social media, email show@talkingdrupal.com, or their Drupal Slack channel.
They do great work over there.
They mentioned Sally as Module of the Week in hashtag 498, and editorially back in hashtag 350. You can suggest modules on their Slack too. And thanks to their patrons.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
And thank you for tuning in to The Deep Dive.
We'll catch you next time.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning.
Okay, we're done. To close off this podcast, I just wanted to remind you that this brief was a fully AI-generated summary, and we take no credit for the original content. If you want to learn more, then check out the source. This podcast is produced by the team at Drupal Forge. Drupal Forge is the new #1 open-source development and hosting platform. It has all the functionality of the expensive platforms, but at very affordable prices. If you're looking for a new hosting provider, contact us for a demo before you get locked in. And if you like this podcast, hit subscribe, post a link on social media, and recommend it to 2 friends. That's it. See you next time. Bye for now.